entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. As you're going to see in the chat in just a moment, the Nasdaq Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So check out those links and resources in the chat. Now, I've got a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First off, let us know where you're dialing in from the chat. See if you've got a neighbor. Secondly, we're going to open up for live Q&A near the end of this session, so please submit those questions for us in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. We hope to get to them all. Now, none of what we do here at the Center would be possible without all the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Wells Fargo, the Neythri Foundation, Walmart.org, JP Morgan Chase, BPM, HubSpot for Startups, and Google Cloud. We're humbled by their contributions and hope you're grateful too. Now I'm going to launch a couple of polls to take a step back and take a temperature gauge on how everyone's doing today. So the first one, how are you feeling about your business? I can't believe how quick 2024 is closing out. Are you optimistic? We use this information to guide the additional support resources that we provide for you, the entrepreneurs out there in the ecosystem. Hello from San Francisco. Looks like optimism is in the lead. So I'm going to share those results. Thank you for voting. And for those of you in survival and anxiety mode, hopefully our presentation today will help. The second poll I'm going to launch is what's keeping you up at night? Is it finance, sales, marketing, scale? We're going to use these inputs as the targets for our upcoming couple of months. So thank you for voting in the poll. All righty. Well, looks like you're in the right place because it looks like these results is sales and scale are at the top, followed by finance. So our topic today is going to be a lot about sales, so hopefully that'll help. So without any further delay, please join me giving a warm welcome in the chat to our special guests today. We've got Donna Pawar, who's a founder and CPO of Veritempo. She's going to be moderating, and she's also on the Center Advisory Board, so great to see you, Donna. We've got Steve Vargas, who's a Sustainability and Climate Advisory Global Head at Nasdaq, and we have Daniela Osio, who's the CEO of Kloopify and a Milestone Makers graduate. And we have Rich Mullen, who's a partner at Wilson Sonsini. Team, so good to see you all. Donna, over to you.
Thank you, Colin, for that awesome introduction. And welcome, everyone. I am so excited to close out the year with this big panel. And as you can see, everyone said sales was top of mind. So this is a perfect time to dive into our panel with our esteemed panelists. And I'm going to get started because we have a lot of content to get through and a ton of questions that have already been sent in. And of course, we have a live Q&A at the end as well. So Daniela, I'm going to start with you with a very pertinent topic. So RFPs, as you know, can be a super complicated and complex landscape to navigate as an entrepreneur. So what do founders need to know at a foundational level, and what advice do you have for them on identifying the right RFPs to go after? And also, how do you get visibility in the value chain?
Ooh, good question. We're starting off strong here. RFP. So a little bit about myself. So I once was on the other side of RFPs. Prior to starting Kloopify, I worked in procurement. So I was the annoying person sending RFPs out that just tended to be like 300 questions long and all that fun stuff. And so there are some tips and tricks. One, take a look at the RFP itself. Before even submitting anything, just understand what can you do? What are the gaps in your RFP? How much effort? Thank you for clarifying. RFP is request for proposal. So these requests come out. Keep in mind, once a request has come out, usually the buyer has pretty clear understanding of what they're looking for. They've got a list of nice to haves, must haves, and they've got a list of, what they wish they could do. So take a look at the list, kind of identify where you are today. And RFPs are both wonderful and they can take up a lot of your time if you just do all of them that come to you. So my first advice is start with doing the ones that are best aligned to you. My second advice is never say no or don't submit anything. If an RFP comes in, even if it isn't the right fit, I would say we can do 30% of the RFP. Here's everything that we do that isn't included in your RFP requirements, just so that even if you don't win that bid, you've got the opportunity they now know who you are, what you offer. And let's say it doesn't work out with the company that does the bid. You now are on the list of shortlisted kind of technologies or solutions that they can come back afterwards. And it's always important to stay top of mind, even if you know or you have this feeling that you're not going to win. The other thing that I would do is really make sure that you understand the key requirements and don't try to sell something that they're not asking for. Like, really just tell them, here's what we can do. Here are the gaps. If you've got it in the roadmap, outline what your roadmap looks like and how you're going to be able to achieve those kind of things that are in the gaps that maybe you don't have today. And as someone who's filled out many RFPs on the other side of things, just a quick kind of tip: leverage AI to be your best friend. Before, we all had to write out each RFP answer like from zero. Now there's so many solutions and tools that are going to allow you to take a first pass at answering the RFP question. And then all you have to do is edit those answers, but be really transparent. So that's like my little trick that we use with kind of submitting as many RFPs, and it's reduced the amount of time that it takes us to submit an RFP from lots of hours to maybe a couple hours. And the other thing is be really clear about what value you can offer today. The last thing you want to do is lie on an RFP or overestimate kind of what you can do for them. So be really clear about what value you can bring today, what value you can bring kind of 30, 60, 90 days, and then what's your roadmap look like, so that they can see, even if you don't have everything today, it may be on the roadmap for things that are coming down the pipeline. And if you're a startup, you are known to be agile and scrappy. So feel free to also add in there, hey, if these are key priorities that you want, the benefit of working with the startup is that you get to influence the design, influence the functionality. You get to be a partner on this journey. And so flex where you have, flex what you're talking about, be honest and transparent, and then leverage AI so that you can answer these RFPs quickly. Last kind of trick or tip that I would say is they're always going to be asking about IT, security. There's like a lot of different components. So try to kind of give information about, kind of puff your chest a little bit about security protocols, data coverage, kind of things that you can do, and put those in the RFP submission documents before you get even asked, because at least you're kind of answering questions that you know they're going to ask of you, and it builds a level of trust and transparency. But would kind of love to hear if there's anything else from the team around RFPs. But if you try to do all of them, it can be like you spend your entire day on weeks and weeks just filling out RFPs. So definitely leverage AI.
Yeah, I love that. I love, especially, pricing is one of the biggest problems that entrepreneurs have. How do I price my service? And, you can get a lot of tips from the past RFPs that have been done in that space from AI, as well as, like you said, really asking what the best practices are and getting started from there. So I think awesome advice. Rich, Steve, do you want anything else you want to add?
I
If
think
not,
Daniela nailed it. Yeah.
So Steve, I was going to ask you, switching gears a little bit and focusing on the suppliers. Supplier diversity and sustainability, as you know, are becoming increasingly important for enterprises today. So how do these priorities integrate into the procurement process, and how can startups position themselves to align with these values that are important to enterprises today?
Yeah, there's a few ways of thinking through that, and we see a fair amount of RFPs ourselves, right? Because what we do day to day is we help earlier stage, but also mature organizations evolve their own sustainability strategy. So quite often they are in market for tools and services that help them, right, become more sustainable or to increase their sustainability profile. I think it's important to just remain cognizant that a lot of these procurement teams leverage a lot of digital platforms, a lot of digital tools that track not only data, but also the progress, right, and the transparency of that data. So this is by no means a static exercise. It continues to be dynamic, continues to be evolving. So just making sure that you're aware and cognizant of how the competitive landscape is shifting gives you a little more insight into how early you need to start thinking about establishing those relationships. Quite often, a lot of the procurement teams will also look to certifications, maybe as a way of maybe benchmarking or assessing, potential, customers to engage with. So making sure you kind of know who's on your target or your prospecting list gives you that insight, right, in terms of what those minimum thresholds are in terms of certifications, maybe how to talk about those credentials. And then for large, enterprises, they've been running RFPs, sometimes for decades. So it's a very mature process. And Daniela, of course, brings a lot of perspective and expertise here. But, some of them will also use, scoring models, right, that allocate or assign higher or lower scores to startups depending on how that startup aligns with their own goals. So making sure that you're positioning your story that aligns with what that prospective customer wants to achieve is really, really integral to that. So there's no shortcuts to this, right? Do your research, right? Make sure that your commercial, your marketing, your sales team, or if it's one person, all right, well, let's loop them all together and have that individual assess, right, who your top prospect sustainability goals are, and then set Google alerts, right, on your top prospecting websites, or subscribe to the newsroom. Quite often when a company comes out and is either proud or really want to evangelize some recent accomplishments that they've made in their sustainability profile, you want to be responsive and reactive to that, right? Companies want to talk about some of the initiatives and progress that they're making. So being clued into what's going on in your prospecting list is incredibly helpful. And then last but not least, it goes into being prepared, but just proactively engaging with enterprises, right? Not necessarily reaching out when it's convenient or you have something to sell, but establish that dialogue early. And Daniela kind of mentioned that a bit earlier, but making sure that you're giving insight into how you're evolving your own internal strategy so they know when to reach back out when the time is right. So it's all about relationship building as our most endeavors in the corporate space. But we'll dig into probably some more topics in a bit.
Yeah, no, I was going to add more to it, but before I do that, I'm going to switch over to Rich, just to continue with the whole supply chain and supplier question. So Rich, this one is for you. With increasing regulatory scrutiny on supply chains, what steps should the impact-driven startups take to ensure compliance and, of course, build trust, right, during the enterprise sales discussions?
Yeah, I think going to some of the things that Daniela said earlier are really important. When you go in and you're talking with a potential customer, you got to be honest with them about what your product capabilities are. The worst possible thing is that you oversell and they're leaning on you for some capability for them to comply with a regulation, or they're expecting that you're complying with a particular regulation and you're not, and that creates exposure for them. You'll never get their business ever again. So being open and honest from the beginning about what your capabilities are, both internally for your own compliance functions and vis-a-vis the product that you're selling them, if you're selling them a product to help them comply with their compliance functions. And to also some of the points that Daniela made is put together a roadmap on what your compliance internal procedures and what your product, how it will evolve over time, from both perspectives, and make sure the customer knows that, because they might be willing to take a bet on your company because they're really excited about the product and the services you're able to offer, even though the compliance functions are not going to be, as good as they might want, just because they like, they like your company, they like the vision that you're selling, and they're willing to grow with you in the long run as you develop and grow. So that's, I think, the most important thing.
Can I add?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, can I add just a couple things to bring Stephen's answer and Rich's answer too, because Stephen talked about relationship building, and I saw in the chat there was a question around RFPs is a long process and how else can we catch the big fish. If you take Stephen's advice and keep the client informed, or even just a prospect informed on what's going on, RFPs are built based off of what they think they need. And so if you are in front of them before the RFP even gets sent out, that means that you have a higher likelihood of the RFP being built and tailored based off of what they learned from you or what you taught them, which means an RFP, the likelihood of you winning that RFP also increases because they're saying, well, you know, the startup told me that they can do XYZ. So now I want XYZ to be a required in my field in this RFP. That means that these RFPs can now begin to get designed based off of what you're selling. And that means your probability of increasing or of getting that RFP continues to win. And then if you look at the industry that you're going after, many of these regulations, especially in the EU and across the world, are affecting certain industries more than they're affecting others. So if you're selling into an industry that's going to be heavily impacted by CBAM, by any of like disclosures, then what you can do is you can show them, hey, we're not just the right partner, but we know this regulation is going to affect you. Here's all the things that we've done to support you and making sure that you're compliant with that, because we want to be the right partners for you. So just to kind of bring maybe those two concepts together, I think that can be really powerful. Selling before the RFP even goes out so that the RFP is there for you. And then being a little like strategic and being like, oh, and we're going to help you with these 7 things that are coming down the pipeline. That's just going to increase your probability of success.
Yeah, and be
That's
super
right.
organized. Have all that laid out in exactly the way that Daniela was just describing. And no one's going to expect you to be perfect. You know, if you're an early stage company, a growth stage company, even a late stage private company, most companies are not going to have perfect compliance functions. So be honest, be organized, and exactly how Daniela just described it.
Yeah, and the one thing I was going to add in line with what Daniela and Rich, you both were saying right now, is also you can start early, right? You can, from day one, you can start being a thought leader in your space, especially, you know, focusing on the sustainability aspect, you know, do a lot of blogs, post on LinkedIn, really build up, and people do check social media across the board. I mean, whatever you're on, LinkedIn obviously makes the most sense, but even Twitter, for example, even though it's a cesspool now, but that's a story for another day. But really become a thought leader in your space across, you know, the internet, right, or the interwebs. So when somebody looks you up or your company up, you already come up as a reputed person in that space or company in that space. I'm going to ask this question. I want to basically, you know, touch base again on the AI part of it, because I think it's so fascinating and so interesting in today's age. So this question is to all of the panelists, right? So of course, enterprises are integrating AI to optimize procurement. And Daniela, I know you talked about this a little bit at the very beginning, but how can startups leverage AI tools? What else can they do to enhance their own sales pitches? How do they stand out during supplier evaluations? And what are the common pitfalls, right? It's not all roses with AI, as we know. What are the pitfalls that they should look for while using AI during the process?
Well, it can cut your cost down significantly. And I think that's huge. And when you're in a startup, cash is king. You got to, I mean, if you are the CEO of your company, your number one job is to stay alive, right? And to make sure that you've got cash to live the next day, right? Yes, it's to provide value, but you've got to stay alive. And so there are so many incredible AI solutions, and more keep popping up every like almost every day. But for example, I had an assistant, and that would cost me, let's say, about $3,000 a month. There are now some incredible AI assistants that can help you in cleaning your inbox, in helping you kind of manage your day-to-day activities, your schedule, your things. So there's just so many ways that AI can help you cut your costs just from an operational perspective, right? But I say all of this with on the other side saying AI is not a silver bullet, and there's still a lot that needs to be done to continue to advance and make it even more powerful, even more secure, even more accurate. So leverage it as like an additional, like making you faster, stronger. You can do more with you can be scrappier and grittier, and you can make cash and capital just run a lot further, especially as kind of the investment. And if you think about venture capital and how there's ebbs and flows, and in 2024, capital wasn't flowing as freely as it was before. So you really needed to optimize your capital expenditure. So AI was a great way of, okay, how can I do things faster without having to hire another body? But keep in mind, AI is still yet to replace all activities, right? So you still need to be critical, you need to be diligent, and you need to understand the problem that you are trying to solve. Be obsessed with the problem, be educated on the technology, and then you can leverage the technology to solve the problem. If it's create a deck faster, if it's whatever it may be, but be obsessed with solving the problem and put your own, you still have to be creative. You still have to be you still have to check everything, right? Don't like blindly trust it. But I think there's so many exciting and new ways that AI can be applied. But for me personally, I think it just helped us become grittier and more agile and do things that would have cost us a lot more money, a lot faster, and for a lot cheaper. So, and as a startup, whoo, that's incredible. I love that.
Yeah, I would add, don't lose your personality. Definitely leverage AI. But for all the reasons that Daniela just described, AI is also making it easier for people to, build and grow companies in a lot of ways. And that means there might be more people pitching for the same business that you're pitching for because it was easier and there's more market competitors. And it'll be very, very important going forward for everybody, myself included even, that you keep your own personality and your own brand and keep your eye on that. And like Daniela said, just don't ship out something that some AI program wrote for you. Put it in your own voice, use it as like a thought piece to get things started, and then make sure that your company, your vision, your voice is ultimately landing as well.
Yeah, great advice. Anything you want to add, Steve?
Yeah, I was going to say, and those are all wonderful pieces of advice, taking notes in the background. But in terms of, what humans are meant to do and what technology is meant to do, obviously very challenging, very cumbersome for individuals to read through very lengthy RFPs or to read through, quite lengthy sustainability or issue reports of some of the enterprise customers that you're trying to attract and win business from. So there's also an advantage in leveraging AI and evaluating and researching a short list of enterprise customers, right? Compiling and aggregating common themes, common trends, common, thresholds of performance, whether it's sustainability or otherwise, that gives you some insight into, the market that you're trying to attack. And then, what would potentially, put your pitch or your proposal over the finish line, just aggregating that intel and assessing it on a much larger data set than perhaps one human being would have time to read through on their own.
Yeah, no, all fantastic insights. And one thing I would add to this is definitely invest in some prompt engineering sort of, assets, because it's garbage in, garbage out, right? Think about the right questions to ask the AI. You ask the right questions with the right prompts, you're going to get the best possible answers. And that's what you're using to augment everything that you already are great at. So, Steve, I'm going to stick with you for the next question. With sustainability becoming a more prominent requirement across the board, how can startups best communicate their own impact initiatives that resonate with enterprise buyers?
Yeah, I would say we're going through certainly a regime change in the world of sustainability. Evolving from the once voluntary realms into the regulatory, especially out in Europe. But a lot of those regs, have impact that transcends borders, physical borders. And one of the ways in which I would say startups and earlier stage companies can get ahead of and deliver messaging and impact initiatives that resonates with enterprise buyers is being conversant in the language that your buyers now have to come up to speed on. And that language is I would say, characterize in a few different acronyms. The first is CSRD. The second is DMA. And I'm guilty of this because I'm also in the sustainability space. So sometimes we use acronyms more so than the actual term behind it. So DMA is short for double materiality assessment. And the reason why this is different, and the reason why it's important to be conversant in this discipline, is because enterprise customers now have to conduct an assessment on their own corporate sustainability profile through the lens of inside out or inside and outside materiality. So what is the impact of the environment and society on the company, but also how does a company's product and services impact climate, right, the environment, as well as society. So this change in philosophy, right, that impact-oriented philosophy is now going to require a lot of companies, right, and sustainability professionals to start thinking about, all right, if I'm trying to win a specific mandate, or if I'm trying to expand client count, or enter new markets that have these elements of impact, how does my product or service benefit the enterprise customer in which I'm trying to sell my product and services to? So it's a regime shift. It's also a philosophy shift. So thinking about moving beyond maybe just the outputs to outcomes. One of the ways in which startups can think about that is stories. Stories are very powerful. Data is helpful, but stories are what people remember. So if there is a way to aggregate and put together either client testimonials, right, on clients that you've already won, where you helped achieve a specific outcome, right, that's powerful. If you can also maybe expand the framework of your thinking beyond just, I would say, enterprise to enterprise. And what I mean by that is, from an impact initiative standpoint, there's already an asset class that has been doing this work for many, many years, and that's impact investing. So if you're trying to get to the root of the matter and you're trying to understand how impact investors allocate their capital to companies and how they want to see their capital achieve specific outcomes, there's already fantastic case studies out there in the public realm. There's already frameworks and methodologies that impact investors use to evaluate how important it is to potentially invest, right, in either early stage companies or maybe more mature companies. So last point of advice is really around, again, kind of expanding the framework in which you think about impact. Enterprise to enterprise is helpful, but just be cognizant of this discipline and this asset class already existing in the investment space. And there's already some interesting use cases to leverage there.
That's great. And that's a perfect segue into my next question. This one is for you, Rich. So just listening to what Steve just said, let's just switch over a little bit about, to talk about negotiating enterprise contracts, right? So what are some of the pitfalls to avoid, or even advice when negotiating enterprise contracts?
So you do your RFP, or you somehow otherwise get someone interested in your product, and now you got to negotiate a contract. It can be a challenging endeavor, especially if you feel like you're outmatched, if you know what I mean. Depending on who the customer is, they might force their form contract on you. If you have a standard form contract, it's always great to try to start from that if you can, because it'll be tailored to your product and have more reasonable terms and the like. But a lot of big buyers are going to require you to, and I'm sure Daniela did this in her old world, sign up to what they have. And a lot of times, unfortunately, they can have some pretty poisonous provisions in them. And you got to be mindful what those are. So if it's a important contract, even if it's not an important contract, honestly, sometimes there can be some really important provisions that can disrupt your business from the future. I would have a sophisticated counsel take a look at it, whether that's internal counsel or external counsel if you don't have an internal counsel. But buyers, customers can put stuff in these contracts that can have an impact on your business for years and years to come, and can prohibit you from getting financings in the future and selling your company if you're ever looking to do that. Things like someone might ask for source code escrows, where they're going to get to keep your escrow. I was just looking at one 2 days ago, very big buyer, had a source code escrow that was released if the company ever did a financing effectively, which like you basically sold your company for one customer contract. The scope of the license for the IP rights is the customer able to just use their IP just for this product that you're delivering to them, or are they able to use the IP for anything that they want, including their own internal projects? Sometimes you'll see buyers have a very broad license that effectively will allow them to use your IP to do anything and everything that they want. Of course, there's things like most favored nations provisions that can affect pricing and rights of first refusal and rights of first negotiation. Lots of traps and pitfalls. And I would say I've seen too often big enterprise customers tell growing companies, startups, my terms are reasonable. You just don't worry about it. You can trust me. I'm not gonna, screw you over later. You just got to sign this. It's our standard form. And there's an element of truth to that, to be honest. But there's also been many situations where a buyer would use those terms against you in the future if they needed to or they wanted to. So go into it eyes wide open and look for the pitfalls and the traps and get some sophisticated advice to help you with it.
Yeah, I think definitely getting experts makes a lot of sense, especially when it comes to legal matters. Sorry, Daniela, were you going to add something?
No, I was just going to add pretty much what you said and maybe a little bit more of saying, in different industries, like in software, there are things that are more important than in hardware, than in different industries. So maybe make a list of the things that are non-negotiables for you. That can be just when you're looking at a contract, there's a couple clauses that no matter what, you've got to look through and you've got to say, no, I can't budge on these 3 things. But transparently, as a startup where, you want to sell and you want revenue and you want to win contracts, right? Be a little bit flexible too. I think the important part is to have the right counsel next to you that helps you identify what are the non-negotiables, also based off of what your strategy is for down the line. Are you trying to exit? Are you trying to, it depends on what your end goal is. Then have your counsel understand what your end goal is. Have your counsel also advise you on what the non-negotiables are. And then don't get hung up on all the little tiny details, right? Like there are some things that are, we've got to look at, there's no way we can budge, right? You can't use my IP for whatever other reason because it's going to affect the end goal. But win the business, because winning the business means that you're going to get revenue, which means that you're going to get maybe investment opportunities, which means that you're going to get other people in that same industry that will follow suit because everyone likes what Steven said, everyone likes a story. And if Joe Schmo on the right already did it and there's already a proof of concept, then, you're going to have this domino effect. And so be smart, but try to get to close, right? And sometimes that contract is the one thing between you and the close of the deal. But to Rich's point, there has to be certain things that you just can't budge on because it's not worth the future of your company either. It's not worth jeopardizing not getting the intended outcome that you want and that you are putting your blood, sweat, and tears into if, that one deal is going to jeopardize everything, right? I think that's really important.
Yeah, and you have to pick your battles, ultimately. Like Danielle was saying, find your non-negotiables, find a second tier that are, important, but you really had to, you could give them up and, ultimately pick your battles because momentum is very important in running a business. And if you got the momentum, try to keep it.
Yeah. And that's a perfect segue into, really highlighting the importance here of building trust, right? So, what are some of the strategies that impact-driven startups can use to demonstrate value, build trust with their enterprise customers who may have tighter budgets? So yeah, any insights there? And this is for all 3 panelists here.
I like your point that you made earlier about becoming a thought leader. I think there's so many voices out in the world right now. But if you become a thought leader in a super niche area and you continuously kind of put out value-driven insights like new research, new case studies, new information, and just be known as the XYZ person, right? Like for me, I talk about all things sustainable procurement all the time. My LinkedIn is sustainable procurement. Like everything I'm posting is either entrepreneurship or like sustainable procurement. They fit in those two buckets. I'm not talking about, some off thing that's interesting, but it's not a part of my brand. So I would say like build a brand, build a thought leadership, consistently be deliberate about the content that you put out there so that people know what to expect when they see your name. That's going to build trust with your users. And one thing that I found that was really helpful to get feedback is gold. And people love to give you feedback. It's like the hidden thing that people love to do. If you reach out to them and you're like, hey, I'm starting a company, I'm doing this. I saw that you had experience in this, and I would love feedback on this. I can't tell you the amount of times when I was at DuPont that I would answer those emails and I would sit down, I would talk to these companies that were saying, hey, new startups, I would say, hey, can you give me feedback on XYZ that I'm doing? That feedback is going to give you the opportunity to get insights, which are worth their weight in gold for startups, but it's also going to give you the opportunity to do what I said earlier, which is coach and teach the buyer on what they should be looking for when they launch that RFP. So become that thought leader, ask for feedback because people love to give it. And then that's how you can get into and say, all right, so what do you care about? What don't you care about? I thought you cared about over here. And they come out and they tell you, nah, that's important. But actually, if we could do this, that would be better. It's going to flow into your roadmap. And now you have the opportunity to come back 6 months later and be like, look at everything I did. Like the feedback you gave me, it's there. So that way they already get into the cycle that if they work with you and they give you feedback, you're willing to listen, you're willing to execute, and you can show I'm making progress on the things that you told me. And I think that's a really good way of building trust.
That's awesome. That's great advice. Rich, Steve, anything you both want to add here?
I was going to say, I love Danielle's take on that, especially around the trust element. So, if you're known for something, right? Pick that something, pick that lane. I'll just kind of put myself in the shoes of a large enterprise, right? At Nasdaq. For me, that demonstrates discipline in how that startup is running the organization, right? They're not chasing every single market opportunity, but if they have a niche, if they've got an area of expertise, if they've got a unique, perspective or a data set that they're building that, adds value to the conversation, and you walk away from, that individual or that company with a different way of thinking about your problem, it's worth its weight in gold, as Daniela said. So I think the discipline aspect of picking one thing that you're known for does establish and I think just enhance the trust that you have as an operator in a pretty competitive space. Sustainability is a crowded market, right? There's a lot of solution providers out there. So just having that unique twist on what you're known for does help, right? With memory, it does help with relationship building. And that's what I would add.
Cool. That's great. Rich, we're getting a little close to our time for the Q&A, but I did want to get this one question in for you. How can an impact-driven startup get on the radar of a strategic buyer that might be interested in an M&A transaction?
Yeah, so I think there's a theme that will speak to this point as well as just selling to customers generally. But it's all about relationship building, to the point that Stephen was making earlier. Get your name out there, network, get to know people. Too many companies and founders, I think, that there's one day going to hire a banker and then they're going to go sell their company. That's not really how it works most of the time with private companies or even public companies for that matter. Usually there's some interested buyer that starts off some kind of process where they start sniffing around, or they make a proposal maybe, and then a target will start exploring their alternatives. But start building a network. That's not saying like go out to mixers and say, hey, would you want to buy my company? Just be yourself and get to know people, and explain your mission and explain your story and let everyone know about your company and all the great things you're doing. So market yourself by not really marketing yourself and just being out in the world. And then importantly, when you get those enterprise customers or, even kind of SMB customers, build great relationships with them too, as part of that relationship. Do a good job. If you have a customer that has become reliant on your product and they can see all the capabilities, that often is a buyer of your company in an M&A deal, because they can see all the benefits they have and they'd like to maybe organize vertically, or maybe they want to bring your capabilities in-house and just keep it for themselves on a different project. And a lot of times, big strategic buyers might buy your company not because they're particularly interested in your product or your business even, but they like your team a lot. So, there's a lot of really amazing entrepreneurs and founders out there, but make sure people know about the good team that's working behind you as well. It's not a 1 or 2 person show running a company. And buyers put a lot of value. I can't tell you how many deals I've done where, the buyer's like, I'm just going to shut down the product 3 days after we close the deal. But I realized that this founder put together a team of 5, 10, 15, 20 people that have worked together and built a really cool product over a 5-year period or 10-year period, however long it's been. And they look at that capability of a group of people that are high functioning and work well together and say, I can take those people and go deploy them on this other thing that I have in my roadmap. And if I were to do it myself, that's going to cost me $75 million in incentives and time and cost. And there's a lot of risk in doing that. Maybe the team doesn't work well together. But if I could just go buy this team that can do that for me, I can pay them $50 million and save 25 million and everyone's happy. That's like kind of a build versus buy model. So, get out there, market, make sure people get to know your team a little bit too, and do great jobs with your customers. Those are some of the great ways.
Yeah, and
We
sometimes
can
it's
talk
also
about that in a whole other session we have before past. So.
No, I was just going to say sometimes M&As also happen because they want to take out the competition, right? They don't want you to go and sell the same thing to their competitor or use it for their competitor. Sometimes it's just taking out the competition. But
let's not let the antitrust regulators hear that. But.
True. I grew up in the world of TripAdvisor where we did that a lot, as you know. But anyways, story for another day. I think we're just on time for Q&A. I really do want to leave time for audience questions. And we have so many amazing questions that were sent ahead of time, as well as I'm already seeing a bunch of questions in the Q&A live chat. So I'm going to ask Colin to come back online for us to go through the questions.
Amazing. Thanks, Donna and Steve, Daniela, Rich. What a great deep dive on this topic. So as Donna mentioned, if you've got any questions, drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try our best to get to them all. All right, just to kick us off, Daniela, you were talking a little bit about earlier how to get in front of customers in terms of like the RFP process and being visible. And the entire panel has talked a little bit about this, but what's your best advice on like really early starting off how to get in front of potential enterprises?
Yeah. Find out where they are, right? Find out where your target is. What do they read? What do they listen to? What conferences do they attend? Where are they going? Once you find out where they are, then it's much easier to be in the same space and place that they are. Find out how they consume media, where their attention is going, because attention is a direct correlation on where kind of money goes, right? So find out that. Then I would start to be consistent about creating content and being heard in those places and in those places that they're at. A lot of conferences love to have up and coming startups like speak at those events and attend those events. And so make sure you start to show face. And then when you go to the conference or you go to these events, don't sit in the back, right? Like go out and be uncomfortable. And if you need to like put your hand out, go shake the hands, go do the thing, go ask the questions, then create a brand for yourself and an image for yourself on LinkedIn too, kind of continue to speak. So they met you once, connect with them afterwards, follow up with a personalized email or a personalized note. This is where I think AI is making everything so noisy that when you take the time to personalize your outreach to somebody that says, hey, we talked about XYZ. When I get LinkedIn requests and I get somebody that says something that is personal, that I'm like, oh yeah, you're right, we did talk about that, I'll accept your request. If it's just a general thing that the 3 people under me have the exact same outreach, I'm not going to pick up. I'm just going to let you live there in my, connection request portal and not actually really much do there. So then create more content. So I think that's kind of key, so that people, when they hear, I need XYZ, you're the first name that comes up, because you've been consistently in front of them, consistently making content, consistently trying to add value to the conversation. And then that's how you build a network. I mean, that's how you build a community authentic. I think that's the key. Don't try to be anything you're not. Be authentic, because in the age of AI, we can all kind of read through it. We're like, that sounds like someone, like, that doesn't even sound like you, right? Be authentic. And I think that's the thing that brings you success.
I couldn't add any more to that. I think that was said perfectly. Something a little bit different is, you have your existing network, right? Maybe it's your customers or mentors or suppliers. Talk to them and ask them to make an introduction to someone that maybe you want to meet. We all go to these conferences, we talk to people. Hopefully you're following up, like Daniela said, and doing coffee or something, getting a chance to sit down outside of the conference setting. But I've personally found that even more impactful than the, kind of cold meeting somebody in that way, is to have somebody that someone else trust recommend you to them. So if you can, increase your net promoter score and let other people talk about you and your business, that is infinitely valuable.
Yeah, that's great advice. Changing a little gears, Steve, you're doing a lot of research at the team with the team on some of the upcoming policies and sustainability. And Rich, I know you guys publish a lot of sustainability reports and updates from a regulatory standpoint. So without a crystal ball, what do you think our impact-driven entrepreneurs have to look forward to or look out for in 2025 in terms of policy? Steve, I'll start with you. Oh, right. No, yeah, Rich.
Yeah.
Go, Steven.
Sure. I'll start us off there. So I think, without having a crystal ball, I think what we can expect is just, I would say, heightened level of due diligence, or longer evaluation periods for assessing impact-driven sustainability solutions or services. And that's usually going to be a function of some of the additional costs associated with procuring those services. So again, going back to, I think the theme of today's conversation is, how do you differentiate? How do you add value, right? There's different ways to describe and define value, but how do you add value to the prospective enterprise customers that you're looking to win, as well as maybe the existing customers that you're already engaging with? But from a regulatory perspective, we've noticed certainly an increase in the likes of Europe's CSRD reporting directive having knock-on effects, not only to some of the companies that we're engaging with today, but also some of the companies that sit within their value chain. So as a startup, again, just being conversant, being articulate in what CSRD means for you as an organization and how it impacts maybe some of your upcoming or potential customers is where I would advise some of the startups in today's audience to just be mindful of, because there's still a fair amount of movement here in the States with regards to regulation. But be curious to get Rich's take on that.
Yeah,
there's definitely a movement towards less regulation, I think, coming up over the next 4 years at least. And I've spoken with a lot of investors and analysts and people in that space, and I think that it is true. There's been a pullback on impact initiatives, and 3 years ago, I think a lot of investors were looking for really high growth companies that, have big impact, and profitability and things like that were less important. And there's without question been a very big shift over the last few years. And I think kind of impact elements have been a little bit less important to like the public markets and the Vanguards and BlackRocks and companies like that, although still important. And I think something that Stephen said is really important, which is, don't lose sight of the underlying value that you're offering to your customers. Are you finding ways to save them money? Are you finding ways to make their processes more efficient? Are you finding ways for them to get inputs, from point A to point B faster in a way that is cheaper and also better for the environment? Whatever the mission is, there's going to be the impact element to it, but then there's also going to be an underlying core business element that is going to be very important to the customer, and make sure that that is getting the proper attention that it needs.
Yeah, that's sound advice. Danielle, you look like you want to add to it.
I think so. I think here's the thing, my friends, especially if you're selling to enterprises, if that enterprise is only following through with sustainability initiatives because a regulation is forcing them, is that the partner or the person you should be going after? Because you can either have a carrot or it can be a stick, right? If they are only doing what's minimally required, then they might not have been the person that sees the value that your technology or that your startup can bring. Now, if you're talking to a company that sees impact and says, all right, well, if I reduce the impact of my supply chain, that means the impact of my product or service that I'm selling you also reduces. I get to differentiate myself. I get to make more money. There are companies and businesses out there that see impact and sustainability as a way to differentiate themselves, as a way to drive revenue, as a way to get new business. And they don't think that this is just strictly going to be tied to one administration, right? Or an administrative regulatory requirements. Regulations are helpful to drive change, but it's not the only reason companies invest in sustainability. And so find the right companies. Don't try to go after the companies and try to convince them of that. No, this is, you've got to change everything inside your company in order to to see the value. Go find the ones that already see value, that are already making those bits, that are making those commitments, that it's worth your time and effort to go after.
Yeah, that's good advice. Donna, I'm going to lean on you for your expertise in B2B go-to-market and all the things and all the companies that you've been to. But Donna, somebody submitted a question around how do you deal with long lead times? So any advice for weathering the long lead time store in the B2B marketplace, just in general too?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who deals in the space, has to be prepared for long lead times. These things take time. And I think the advice that everyone's been giving is the same I'm going to give. Just keep building on your own personal story, keep building on your own thought leadership in the space. Just do all the right things while, you're still selling in parallel, but just build your own net sort of presence or net worth in the space, right? And that's the only thing you can do, because lead times are long and there's not much you can do to change those lead times, because that's just the process. But I think this is advice we've all been hearing a lot today, which is build trust, build confidence in yourself, in your company, and just network, like everyone's been saying. Reach out. You don't have to reach out to the decision maker of the RFP, because obviously you can't, but do things that are, soft things around the RFP itself. Try and do some press releases around that time, again, to get your quotient up, right, in terms of your visibility. But outside of that, you just have to write it out, but keep doing these things in parallel and don't get disillusioned is all I'm going to say. If you believe in your product, just stick with your gut and wait for the results. So.
Awesome. Yeah, somebody much smarter than me told me, and a couple of our milestone makers, that your number one competitor as a B2B company in the early days is education and awareness. It's not other companies. Danielle is nodding at that one. Yeah.
Yes, without a doubt, without a doubt. I think that's where it's important to get no's are your best friend. And I know it hurts because you like getting a no is your body experiences a no the same way it experiences pain. Like you feel it, but no's, especially in the sales process, are your best friend. No, because it's too expensive. So what was the value trade-off? No, because it's not the right time. Okay, so what's the maturity I'm looking for? No, because so the fastest way to a yes, a no, because it tells you what levers you need to pull on and maybe change the offering to get to a yes. And the last thing you want is to have 17 meetings about how I'm going to educate you on why you need to care and then push it off to, 2 years from now. So try to understand kind of the process there.
Amazing. Well, we are almost at time, but what a treat to learn from each and every one of you. And Daniela, I think you ended the How to Catch a Big Green Fish on such a great note. And let's get to some yeses out there. Let's close out the year on a high note, and hopefully everything that you all gave as advice was helpful to everyone here. So Donna, Steve, Rich, Daniela, just really appreciate being able to host you today and learn from you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And please feel free to use the links, connect with, I'm sure Steve and Rich, you're going to say the same, but connect with us. Feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to ask us questions. I strongly believe if you have the privilege of learning, you have the responsibility of teaching. So happy to chat with any kind of early stage, any founders at any stage, and share wisdom, insights, all those things. So please, let's stay in touch.
Amazing. Rich.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all. We really appreciate you and your time today. For those of you still in the audience, thank you for joining. And we've got a lot of good stuff coming up in the early part of next year. So keep in touch. Check out some links and resources in the chat. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. And we'll see you all online soon. Thanks again, everyone.